The hurried footsteps echo through the streets of Ephesus. A young man runs, clutching a hidden parchment beneath his tunic. He knows that if he's caught, it will mean a death sentence. But the secret he carries with him could change the destiny of the Christian faith forever. Timothy was not just a disciple. He was chosen to continue Paul's mission. Yet, there is something in his story that has never been fully revealed. And now, that secret rests in Timothy's hands. What did Timothy discover that made him a target? What secret did he guard so deeply that his life was constantly in danger? Why has the story been overshadowed for centuries? The truth you are about to uncover could change everything you think you know about early Christianity. Stay tuned. What we're about to reveal next will astonish you. And subscribe to the channel now to receive more valuable content like this. Join us as we explore how Timothy became a symbol of faith, perseverance, and wisdom in the face of the challenges he faced. Timothy was born in the city of Lystra, a small Roman province in the region of Galatia. From an early age, his life was marked by a silent conflict between two traditions that would shape his path. His mother, Eunice, was a devout Jew who taught him the scriptures and the commandments of the God of Israel. His grandmother, Lois, reinforced those teachings with stories of the prophets and the promises made to the chosen people. For them, Timothy was a special child, destined for something greater. But within the home, there was another influence, his father, a Greek man who did not share the faith of Eunice and Lois. He was a respected man among the Gentiles of the city, a merchant who valued reason and Hellenic culture. To him, his wife's and mother-in-law's spiritual pursuits were nothing but superstition and weakness. He wanted Timothy to grow strong and wise according to Greco-Roman values. This contrast shaped Timothy's childhood. In the mornings, Eunice taught him about Moses, David, and the prophets, speaking of the one true God, creator of the heavens and the earth, and how Israel had been chosen to bring light to the world. But in the afternoons, when he was with his father, Timothy heard stories about Alexander the Great and the gods of Olympus. His father encouraged him to study philosophy and to value reason above all else. As the years passed, Timothy realized he couldn't remain divided between these two worlds forever. By the age of 12, he felt the weight of trying to please both sides. He saw the sadness in his mother's eyes when his father mocked the prayers she said before meals, but he also saw the pride in his father's face when he showed interest in Greek teachings. He didn't know who he should be, the son of a woman of faith or the heir to his father's culture. Doubt grew in his heart like a storm. He felt alone, unsure which path to follow. Who was right, his mother, who spoke of a God who demanded obedience and sacrifice, or his father, who believed in the greatness of humanity and the power of intellect? One night, after a long day of studies, Timothy overheard an argument between his parents. His father, irritated, said the boy needed to stop wasting time with ancient stories and learn something useful for life. Eunice, in turn, responded firmly, "The knowledge of men may lead to earthly greatness, but the wisdom of God leads to eternity. Our son needs to know the truth." Timothy, hidden behind the door, felt his heart pounding harder. The truth? What was the truth? Confused, he went out for a walk through the quiet streets of Lystra. The sky was filled with stars, and the moon illuminated the city. He looked up and wondered if God truly had a plan for him. It was then that his mother found him, her eyes full of love and concern. She took his hands and softly said, "My son, doubt can be a burden, but it can also be a calling. You must decide. Will you follow the wide path that leads to the recognition of men, or the narrow path that leads to the truth?" Timothy felt a shiver run through his body. He still didn't have an answer, but he knew his life would never be the same. Young Timothy was torn between two worlds, but a new presence was about to enter his life. Someone who would change everything forever. The days passed slowly in Lystra, but that day, something was different. A murmur ran through the stone streets of the small town. A Jewish preacher had arrived, accompanied by a group of followers, and his message was causing a great stir. His name was Paul, and everyone was talking about him. They said he had once been a persecutor of Jesus' followers, but was now one of their most fervent disciples. Timothy heard the rumors while helping his mother organize supplies at home. He didn't know what to think. His mother spoke of Jesus as the promised Messiah, but many said following that path was dangerous. Still, something inside him urged him to learn more about this man. When Paul began preaching in the central square of Lystra, Timothy blended into the crowd. He watched closely as the preacher spoke passionately about salvation and the grace of God. There was something in his words that deeply touched Timothy's heart. Unlike the Jewish teachers who spoke only of the law, Paul spoke of love that transcends rules and sacrifices. Salvation does not come from the works of the law, he declared with conviction, but through faith in Christ. Timothy felt a chill. He had never heard anyone speak like that. It made sense. He looked around and saw that many were confused or upset, but for the first time, he felt he was hearing something true. After the sermon, Timothy hesitantly approached. He wanted to hear more. Paul, noticing the young man, smiled and asked, "What is your name, boy?" "Timothy," he replied nervously. "And who has taught you about the God of Israel?" "My mother and grandmother. They've always told me he has a purpose for my life." Paul looked at Timothy for a moment, as if seeing something beyond what stood before him. Then he placed his hand on his shoulder and said, "And perhaps that purpose is beginning now. Come with me." Those words made Timothy's heart race. He blinked, confused. "Come with you?" "Yes. There is much to learn, and I see that the Lord has already planted a seed in your heart. I want to teach you, guide you, show you what it truly means to serve God." Timothy felt his hands sweat. His heart told him to accept, but his mind hesitated. He knew what it meant. If he followed Paul, he would leave behind everything he knew: his home, his family, his city. He might never see his mother and grandmother again, and his father surely wouldn't approve. That night, Timothy lay awake, staring at the ceiling of his room. His mother noticed his restlessness and sat beside him. "What's wrong, my son?" He hesitated before answering. "Paul has called me to follow him." Eunice remained silent for a moment, then gave a faint smile, though there was a glimmer of sadness in her eyes. She had known this day would come. "Do you want to go?" She took his hand gently. "It's not about what I want, Timothy. It's about what God wants. If he is calling you, who am I to stand in the way?" Timothy felt a lump in his throat. He wanted to go, to learn, to live out the calling. But what if he was making a mistake? What if he wasn't strong enough? The next day, he met Paul again. The apostle awaited his answer. Timothy looked at him, then at the road leading out of Lystra. It was a road to the unknown. Timothy stood before the hardest decision of his life. He will leave everything for the calling, or fear will speak louder. His destiny has already begun to unfold. Timothy's journey began before he even realized it. The dusty road stretched out before him, and the dust kicked up by Paul's feet and his companions tickled his face. His heart pounded, not from exhaustion, but from anxiety. He had left everything behind: his home, his mother, his grandmother, his hometown, and now he was following an uncertain path. Paul led the group with firm steps and a resolute gaze. Silas, another traveling companion, walked beside Timothy, sometimes offering words of encouragement. But deep inside, the young man still wondered if he had made the right decision. After days of travel, they arrived at a city where Christians gathered in secret. It was night when they were brought to a simple house, lit only by the trembling flame of oil lamps. Inside, a small group was gathered in prayer. There were women, children, and elders, all with eyes full of faith, but also fear. Timothy observed everything in silence. He watched as Paul preached passionately, speaking about hope in Christ, about a kingdom that was not of this world. The people listened intently. Some cried, others nodded, holding hands with those beside them. But there was something in the air, a weight, a tension that Timothy couldn't ignore. Suddenly, the sound of hurried footsteps echoed. A man burst through the door, breathless and covered in dust. "They're coming! The soldiers are coming!" Panic spread like wildfire. Some began to rise, others prayed silently. Timothy froze. He looked at Paul, expecting a reaction. The apostle remained calm. "Let us stand firm. We will not hide." Before they could decide what to do, the door was smashed down. Armed men stormed in violently, torches and swords in hand. One of them, clearly the leader, pointed at the group. "These are the followers of that false prophet. Take them." Chaos erupted immediately. Timothy saw women being dragged, men beaten, children crying. The smell of smoke filled the air, and then he saw it. In the midst of the turmoil, one of the Christians, an elderly man with a white beard and kind eyes, was dragged outside by the soldiers. "Renounce your faith," ordered the leader of the soldiers. The old man lifted his head. His face was bruised, but his gaze was firm. "No, my Lord is Christ." The response was followed by a brutal blow. The man fell to his knees, spitting blood. Timothy felt a knot in his stomach. He wanted to do something, but his body wouldn't move. "Renounce or die," shouted the soldier again. The old man took a deep breath and closed his eyes. "Father, forgive them." The sword came down. Timothy couldn't breathe. Everything around him became blurry. Voices faded. Blood stained the ground. "We have to flee." Paul grabbed Timothy by the arm and pulled him out of the house. As the chaos continued, they ran to the dark streets, dodging guards until they managed to hide in an abandoned ruin. The silence was sharp. Timothy trembled. His hands were cold. "He died," he whispered finally. Paul nodded. "Yes, but not in vain. He died in Christ." "I don't know if I can handle this." Timothy's voice broke. He looked at Paul, hoping for a response, for certainty, something to ease the pain in his chest. The apostle placed a hand on his shoulder. "No one is born ready, Timothy, but faith sustains us. You must decide whether to trust in God or let fear dominate you." Timothy averted his gaze. The images of the night haunted him. Faced with the brutality of persecution, Timothy began to question his own strength. Would he be able to continue on this path? Or would fear cause him to give up before he even started? Before we continue, we ask for your support. Subscribe to the channel and leave a like on the video to bless us and help us keep sharing these Bible stories. Now, let's move on to Timothy's never-revealed secret. The moon was high when Timothy wandered away from the small group resting among the ruins of a destroyed house. The smell of smoke still lingered in the air, reminding him of the terrible night they had endured. He hugged himself, trying to ward off the cold and at the same time, the thoughts tormenting him. The old man's blood still seemed to be before his eyes. The scene of the execution replayed in his mind. Am I ready for this? The question weighed like a stone in his chest. As he walked through the empty streets, he felt as though he was being watched. He stopped and looked around. The shadows of the buildings seemed to move with the flickering light of distant torches. Then a low, soft voice resonated. "Lost in thought, young disciple?" Timothy turned quickly. A hooded man was leaning against a stone wall, almost blending into the darkness. His eyes gleamed with cunning. "Who are you?" Timothy asked, taking a step back. The stranger smiled. "Just a man who observes. I saw what happened today. I saw your eyes when that old man fell beneath the blade of the sword. You're afraid." Timothy swallowed hard. "I'm just reflecting." The man pushed off the wall and slowly walked toward him. "You follow Paul, don't you? The great preacher, the apostle of the Gentiles, speaks of faith, hope, and suffering for the kingdom of heaven. But have you ever wondered what he's really after?" Timothy frowned. "What do you mean by that?" The man tilted his head, as if studying his reaction. "Do you really know Paul? Does he tell you everything, or only what he wants you to know?" A shiver ran down Timothy's spine. "Paul is a servant of Christ. He has taught me about faith, about God's purpose." The stranger let out a low laugh. "Purpose? Yes, he talks about that. But tell me, have you ever wondered why he's always fleeing? Why is there always persecution wherever he goes? Is it really for truth?" Timothy didn't know how to respond. "What are you trying to tell me?" The man took another step closer, close enough for Timothy to feel his warm breath in the cold night air. "There are secrets Paul has never told you. You think you're here by choice, but in reality, you're being molded for something you don't even understand. You're just a piece in a much larger game." Timothy's heart raced. "I don't believe you." The man smiled again, this time with a cruel glint in his eyes. "You don't believe me now, but when the truth is revealed, it may be too late." Before Timothy could respond, the stranger disappeared into the shadows of the narrow streets. The young man stood still for a long time, his heart racing and his mind restless. What if there was some truth in those words? What if Paul was hiding something? The seeds of doubt had been planted. Timothy would begin to question his faith in Paul, or find the strength to resist the stranger's insinuations. The journey continued, but the tension in the group was palpable since the encounter with the stranger that night. Timothy felt a weight in his chest, as if something was about to happen. He tried to push away the doubts tormenting his mind, but the man's words kept echoing within him. Paul walked ahead, conversing quietly with Luke. Behind them, other followers stayed close, avoiding drawing attention. Among them was Demas, a man who had been accompanying Paul for some time, but who lately seemed distant, troubled. The sun beat down mercilessly on the road. The dusty road stretched on as the group stopped to rest under the shade of a twisted tree. Timothy sat on a rock and watched Demas walk away, gazing into the distance as if waiting for someone. "He's been strange for days," Silas whispered, sitting next to Timothy. Timothy nodded. "Something is troubling his soul, but I don't know what it is." Silas sighed, wiping the sweat from his forehead. Sometimes men's hearts waver when persecution becomes real. Not everyone is prepared to die for this faith. Timothy remained silent, reflecting on those words. Since joining Paul, he had witnessed the cost of faith. He himself felt fear, but something inside him pushed him to keep going. But what if someone in the group didn't have the same determination? As evening fell and they resumed their journey, the sound of hurried footsteps made everyone turn. Demas was running toward them, his face pale and eyes wide open. "Soldiers," he gasped. "They're coming this way." The group immediately went on high alert. Paul raised his hand, signaling everyone to run toward a nearby forest. But something didn't feel right. Timothy felt a chill run down his neck. "How did you see them, Demas?" Paul asked, staring directly into his eyes. Demas hesitated for a moment, but quickly pointed toward the path. "I went to fetch water and saw them coming. We must flee." Time seemed to slow down for Timothy. Something didn't make sense. He looked at the others, who also seemed suspicious. Then the sound of horse hooves broke through the air, and the answer came brutally. From the nearby bushes, soldiers emerged with spears and sword in hand. It was an ambush. "Run," Paul shouted. The group scattered, trying to escape through the dense vegetation. Timothy was pushed forward by Silas, who yelled at him to keep going. But as he ran, he glanced back and saw something that confirmed his worst fears. Demas was standing beside one of the soldiers, speaking in a low voice. Then he took a small pouch of coins and tucked it into his belt. Timothy felt a knot in his stomach. Demas had betrayed them. The betrayal was among them, and now no one was safe. If Demas had been capable of betraying Paul, could there be other traitors in the group? Would they manage to escape before it was too late? Night had fallen, and the group was hiding in a cave in the hills, far from the main road. The attack by the soldiers had scattered them, but little by little, they had managed to regroup. Still, the atmosphere was heavy with fear and uncertainty. Timothy sat near the entrance of the cave, his eyes fixed on the darkness. His heart felt heavy. Demas's betrayal had been a hard blow. How could someone who had walked alongside them, heard Paul's words, and shared bread, sell them out like that? Paul, seated a little apart, observed the young man attentively. He recognized that look. He had felt it before. Timothy called out to him in a calm but firm voice. Timothy turned, snapping out his thoughts. "Come here," Paul said, patting the ground beside him. Hesitant, Timothy obeyed. He sat next to the apostle, who remained silent for a moment, as if carefully choosing his words. "You are afraid," Paul said. "How could I not be?" Timothy replied, lowering his gaze. "We're fleeing like criminals. We were betrayed by someone we trusted." He paused, unable to continue. Paul nodded slowly. "I've been through this before. Timothy, since I accepted this mission, I've been relentlessly persecuted. I've been whipped, imprisoned, stoned. I've suffered hunger, cold, and betrayal. There were moments when I thought I couldn't endure any longer." Timothy remained silent, absorbing those words. "When I was in Philippi," Paul continued, "I was thrown into prison. My feet and hands were chained, and the walls were as cold as death. The guards mocked me, but I wasn't alone." He looked Timothy straight in the eyes. "God was with me. Paul's voice was firm, without hesitation. He believed it with every fiber of his being. Timothy swallowed hard. I don't know if I'm that strong. Paul smiled, a tired but conviction-filled smile. None of us are, Timothy, not by ourselves. But it is in our weakness that we find strength. Timothy felt a lump in his throat. He wanted to believe. He wanted to have that same unshakable faith. But deep inside, a question kept echoing. Am I truly ready to pay the same price that Paul has paid? A noise outside the cave made everyone flinch. Silas approached quickly. I think they've found us. Timothy felt the blood rush to his head. Were the soldiers close? And if they were captured, would Timothy be ready to face the suffering Paul had described? The sun burned mercilessly over the dusty road. Timothy, walking alongside Paul and the other companions, trudged in silence, lost in thought. The soldiers' attack still haunted him, but something else troubled him. He tried to ignore the voice of doubt whispering within him. They stopped in a small village to rest and gather supplies. Timothy wandered off for a moment, approaching a well to wash his face and try to shake off the exhaustion. When he lifted his head, he noticed an old man watching him intently. The stranger's skin was marked by time, his eyes piercing, and he carried the air of someone who knew stories no one else did. You, the old man murmured. Timothy frowned. Sorry. The man stepped closer, examining him carefully. You look a lot like someone I once knew. A shiver ran down Timothy's spine. Who? The old man took a deep breath. Your father. The word made Timothy's heart race. His father had always been a shadow in his life, a distant man of another belief who never truly cared about his faith. Did you know him? Timothy asked, uncertain. The old man nodded. I knew him very well. And if you are his son, then there is something you must know. Timothy felt a knot in his chest. What do you mean? The old man glanced around, making sure no one else was listening. Then he leaned slightly toward Timothy and whispered, Your father was not the man you think he was. He had secrets that, if revealed, could change everything you believe about yourself. The world seemed to spin around Timothy. What do you mean by that? The old man opened his mouth to respond, but before he could speak, a shout echoed from the other side of the village. Soldiers are coming. Panic spread among the people. Timothy turned to call Paul, but when he looked back, the old man had vanished. Who was that man? What secrets did he know about Timothy's father? And why had he disappeared so suddenly? The group hurried along the narrow path, leaving behind the village where the soldiers had suddenly appeared. Paul, ever vigilant, led the journey with words of encouragement, but Timothy could barely hear him. His mind was trapped on what the old man had said. Asterisk, your father was not the man you think he was. He had secrets that, if revealed, could change everything you believe about yourself. Asterisk, why had the old man disappeared so quickly? What did he really know? And why had he chosen that moment to reveal such a thing? Timothy looked around. His companions were exhausted, their garments covered in dust, their faces marked by the fear of persecution. But as he observed them, he couldn't shake the feeling that the truth about his father, and perhaps about himself, was more complicated than he had ever imagined. From the last attack, the soldiers seemed to find them too easily. They were discovered too quickly, as if someone knew where they were headed. A chill ran down his spine. There was a traitor among them. That night, the group gathered in a secluded forest. A small fire crackled in the center, casting distorted shadows around them. Paul spoke quietly with Silas while Luke wrote on a parchment. Timothy observed everyone carefully. Who could be delivering information to the enemy? He began to recall small details. Days earlier, one of the companions had insisted on taking a specific path, one that led them directly into a Roman patrol. At the time, everyone thought it was an accident, but was it really? Another memory crossed his mind. One night, while they were hiding, Timothy woke up and saw a silhouette walking away from the camp. At the time, he thought it was someone fetching water, but now he wasn't so sure. Who among us desires our ruin? He swallowed hard. He couldn't make accusations without proof, but he needed to uncover the truth before it was too late. As he tried to push the doubts from his mind, a voice rose in the night. Everyone's asleep. Timothy, startled, looked to the side and saw one of the companions, a man named Demas, sitting by the fire, his gaze lost in the flames. "I'm still awake," Timothy replied. Demas sighed. "Have you ever had doubts?" Timothy was surprised by the question. "What do you mean?" Demas moved a log in the fire, watching the sparks rise into the dark sky. "About all this, about Paul, about the mission, about whether it's really worth it." Timothy felt a knot in his chest. "Are you tired, Demas?" "We're all tired," Demas insisted. "It's not that. What if we're being deceived?" Those words froze Timothy's blood. "What do you mean?" Demas gave a strange smile. "Just something to think about." Then he stood up and disappeared into the darkness. Timothy remained motionless, his heart racing. Who was the real traitor? Was Demas just a tired man, or was he hiding something more? How could Timothy be sure who was on his side and who was against him? The city of Rome was engulfed in chaos. The streets, filled with Roman soldiers, echoed with the cries of prisoners and the murmurs of frightened crowds spreading like wildfire. The empire was intensifying its persecution of Christ's followers. And now, the worst had happened. Paul had been captured. Timothy ran through the narrow alleys, his heart pounding in his chest. He didn't know exactly where he was going. He only knew he had to find him. The mentor who had guided him, taught him, and given him purpose was now in the hands of the enemy. When he finally reached the marketplace, the news had already spread. "They've taken him to the Mamertine prison," whispered one of the hidden Christians, too afraid to raise his head. "They say Nero wants to execute him publicly." Those words struck Timothy like a dagger. Night fell over Rome, but Timothy couldn't rest. He paced back and forth inside the hideout of Christ's followers, feeling the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. Since joining Paul, there had always been a leader, someone to turn to. Now, with his mentor imprisoned, many looked to him for direction. Luke approached and placed a hand on his shoulder. "We must act wisely. If we try to free him, we'll all die. But we can't just abandon him." Timothy responded, his voice breaking. Luke nodded, but his expression was grave. "Then we must be as shrewd as serpents and as innocent as doves." Timothy felt a lump form in his throat. He had always believed he was ready to follow in Paul's footsteps, but now, standing alone, the weight of responsibility seemed crushing. Asterisk, what if I fail? What if I lead the others to their deaths? Asterisk, doubt grew within him like a storm. The next day, risking encounters with soldiers, Timothy managed to reach the Mamertine prison. The smell of dampness and decay filled the air. After bribing one of the guards, he was led to the dark cell where Paul was imprisoned. The mentor was seated on the cold floor, his wrists chained, but his expression remained serene. "Timothy," Paul smiled, though weak. He had known Timothy would come. Timothy fell to his knees in front of him, gripping the bars tightly. "What are we going to do? How can I help you?" Paul looked at him tenderly. "Do what you've always done, my son, preach the truth." "But without you, I don't know if I can," Timothy confessed, his voice trembling. Paul took a deep breath. "I knew this day would come, and so did you. It's not me who guides this path. Timothy, it's Christ. You've never been alone." The apostle's words deeply touched Timothy's heart, but still, the fear didn't disappear. When he left the prison that night, Timothy knew Paul wouldn't leave alive. The emperor wanted his death. Time was running out. As he walked through the dark streets, a voice sounded beside him. "What will you do now, Timothy?" He turned and saw Demas emerging from the shadows. His gaze was unreadable. "Do you think you can continue without Paul?" Timothy felt doubt grow within him again, but this time, something inside him changed. He couldn't wait any longer. He had to act. Will Timothy assume the responsibility of continuing the mission? Will Demas's betrayal finally be revealed? And will Paul face his fate without fear? Silence hung in the small hideout where Rome's Christians gathered. Timothy held the parchment with trembling hands, unable to take his eyes off the ancient words written on it. The flickering light of the lamp made the letters dance before his eyes, as if trying to escape his understanding. He had found the parchment in the hiding place of a mysterious man who had been watching him for days. He didn't know if it was a coincidence or if it had been intentionally left there, but his heart raced as he deciphered the first words. It was an account of his own ancestry. He felt a chill run down his spine. Since childhood, he had lived divided between two worlds: the faith taught by his mother and grandmother, and the Greek blood inherited from his father. Now, those lines revealed there was much more to uncover. Luke approached, seeing the unease reflected on Timothy's face. "What's wrong? What does that parchment say?" Timothy hesitated. Part of him wanted to keep it to himself, as if by not sharing it, he could maintain control over his own reality. But another part needed help to understand it. "It speaks of my origins, something I never knew." Luke frowned. "Who gave this to you?" "I found it, or perhaps it was left for me." The physician looked at the parchment and then at Timothy. "And what did you discover?" Timothy took a deep breath before answering. "My father wasn't just any Greek. He had connections with powerful men, and perhaps even with those who persecute our faith." The words came out of his mouth, like a weight finally released, but the void that remained was even worse. Luke narrowed his eyes. "This could be a trap, Timothy. Someone might be trying to confuse your mind." Timothy knew it was possible. The timing couldn't be worse. Opportune, just now. With Paul in prison and Timothy beginning to assert himself as a leader, was precisely when his enemies would strike. But still, he couldn't ignore the feeling that this was real. He tucked the parchment back into his garments and stood up. "I need to uncover the truth." Luke grabbed his arm. "Don't do it alone." Timothy looked at his friend and slowly shook his head. "I know, but I can't ignore it either." Doubt and fear swirled within him. If this was true, what did it mean for his mission? For his faith? The feeling that something was wrong grew with every passing moment. As he left the hideout that night, he had the distinct impression that someone was watching him. Asterisk, what is really hidden in Timothy's past? Is he being manipulated, or will the truth change everything? And who is lurking in the shadows? Asterisk. Timothy walked to the damp corridors of the prison, the smell of rust and decay heavy in the air. Each step felt heavier than the last. He had faced many challenges alongside Paul, but this moment seemed to be the hardest of them all. The Roman guards let him pass, perhaps out of disdain, perhaps out of pity. To them, Paul was just another condemned man, a prisoner of no importance. But to Timothy, he was much more than a teacher. He was a spiritual father, a guide who had shaped his life and faith. When he reached the cell, he found Paul sitting on a pile of dirty straw, his wrists bruised from the chains. But despite the misery surrounding him, there was something unshakable about him, a serenity that defied even death. Paul looked up and gave a faint smile. "I knew you'd come." Timothy knelt beside him, swallowing the emotion rising in his throat. I tried to stop this, but they wouldn't listen. They never do." Paul took a deep breath. "That doesn't matter. What matters is that the Word of God remains alive, and you, Timothy, have a role in it." Timothy averted his gaze, feeling the weight of everything that was happening. "I don't know if I'm ready." "No one ever is," Paul said, placing a hand on his shoulder. "But you don't need to be ready, just faithful." The silence between them lasted only a few seconds, but it felt like an eternity. Then Paul lowered his voice and said something that made Timothy's heart race. "There's something you must discover for yourself, something I've kept hidden until now." Timothy frowned. "What do you mean?" Paul squinted, as if searching for the right words. "Not everything we know has been revealed. You must continue the search. Go beyond what I've taught you. There are hidden truths, and your path lies among them." Timothy felt a chill. He was already grappling with doubts about his past, about the mysterious parchment he had found. And now Paul was telling him there were more secrets. "Where should I look?" Paul gave a faint smile. "You'll know when the time comes." Before Timothy could press further, the sound of guards' footsteps echoed down the corridor. "It's time." 2 Roman soldiers opened the cell and dragged Paul away. He didn't resist, only casting one last glance at Timothy. "Don't let fear stop you from moving forward." And then he was gone. Timothy remained kneeling, feeling a void grow inside him. Paul's final words echoed in his mind, laden with mystery. He needed to know the truth, but would he be ready for it? What did Paul mean with his enigmatic message? What truths remained hidden? Would Timothy uncover the truth before it was too late? Timothy felt the overwhelming weight of uncertainty pressing on his chest. Since Paul's arrest and the first signs of betrayal among the brothers of faith, a deep unease consumed him. Something was wrong, and he needed to uncover the truth before it was too late. Paul's cryptic words before his execution echoed in his mind. Asterisk, the truth will set you free, but first it will destroy you. Asterisk, what did he mean by that? The night was dark and silent when Timothy decided to act. He had carefully observed the movements of a man who, for days, had been raising his suspicions. Small slips, evasive glances, whispers exchanged in shadows, all pointed to the fact that he was hiding something. Now, concealed among the trees, Timothy watched him hurry toward an isolated cave on the outskirts of the camp. He followed, his feet sliding silently over the damp earth. Anxiety tightened his chest, but he needed to remain calm. When he finally entered the cave, he found a man kneeling before a small torch, holding a trembling parchment in his hands. "I knew you'd come, Timothy," the man said without turning around. A chill ran down Timothy's spine. "Then don't pretend to be surprised," Timothy responded, stepping forward. "Who are you really, and what are you hiding?" The man sighed and, with a slow and calculated movement, unrolled the parchment. The flickering light of the torch brought the words to life. Timothy felt the world spin as he recognized the names inscribed on it. His own name was written alongside another that made him catch his breath. "This can't be true," he murmured, his voice breaking. The man looked up, his expression a mix of compassion and gravity. "It's true, Timothy. Your father wasn't who you thought he was." Timothy's heart pounded fiercely against his chest. All his life, he had believed his Greek father was simply a distant, absent man, someone of little importance in his journey of faith. But now, the words on the parchment screamed another truth. His father had been a powerful and influential man. And worse, he was directly involved in the persecution of Christians. That's a lie. Timothy took a step back, feeling despair take hold of him. "You can deny it all you want, but this is your heritage," the man insisted. "That's why Paul always hesitated to tell you. He feared this would break your faith." Timothy's mind was in chaos. His mentor had known all along. Had Timothy been protected from the truth or deceived? He felt his legs weaken, his breathing quicken. How could he continue his path now? How could he preach the gospel knowing that the blood of a persecutor ran through his veins? The man stepped forward and placed a hand on Timothy's shoulder. "What will you do now, Timothy? Will you run from this truth, or will you use it to become even stronger?" Timothy closed his eyes for a moment. He wanted to respond, to fight against this revelation, but he couldn't. Everything had changed. He didn't know if he could move forward. But before he could decide, a sound echoed outside the cave. Footsteps. Someone was listening. Someone who didn't want this truth to come to light. Timothy held his breath. The footsteps outside the cave resonated in the silence of night. Firm and calculated. Whoever it was knew there was something important here. He looked at the man in front of him, who quickly extinguished the torch, plunging the place into total darkness. "Stay still," he whispered. Timothy's heart pounded fiercely against his chest. The newly revealed truth still spun in his mind, but now his priority had shifted. Survival. Shadows danced at the entrance of the cave as a hooded figure appeared. The blade of a dagger gleamed under the moonlight. "I know you're in there," said a cold, sharp voice. Timothy swallowed hard, feeling the weight of the parchment in his tunic. This was the proof of the truth, the revelation that could change everything. And apparently, someone wanted to ensure he didn't live long enough to understand it. The man beside him grabbed Timothy's arm firmly. "We need to get out of here. Now." Timothy hesitated. Running meant losing the chance to uncover more about his lineage, but staying could cost him his life. Suddenly, the hooded figure lunged forward, blade glinting in the dim light. The man lunged forward, and the gleam of the dagger sliced through the air. The man beside Timothy threw himself against the attacker, creating a gap for Timothy to escape. "Run!" he shouted. Timothy didn't want to leave him behind, but his survival was crucial. With burning eyes, he ran out of the cave, the sounds of the struggle behind him blending with the frantic beating of his heart. When he reached the path, He felt his legs trembling. Everything was falling apart. Paul was gone. The truth about his origins consumed him. And now, someone was willing to kill him to prevent that truth from coming to light. He fled from the cave as fast as he could, his feet sinking into the damp earth of the dark trail. In the distance, he saw the small village where the brothers of faith rested. But as he thought of them, another doubt struck him. Should I continue this path? Paul had trained him to be a leader, to preach the gospel and strengthen the brethren in the faith. But now, Timothy felt his heart divided. How could he teach about faith when he himself was lost? How could he speak of redemption when the shadows of his lineage haunted him? His eyes fell on the parchment hidden in his tunic. Asterisk, what if my path isn't to follow Paul's legacy? What if my mission lies elsewhere? Asterisk, the weight of that decision nearly suffocated him. He knew every choice would have devastating consequences. The cold night wind whipped his face, and he realized he had to decide. But before he could even reflect, he heard hurried footsteps behind him. He turned sharply. A torch flickered in the distance. Someone was following him. Then, a voice whispered in the darkness, close enough to send chills down his spine. Asterisk, you cannot run from your destiny. Timothy. Asterisk, Timothy was surrounded. Who was chasing him? Would he manage to escape, or would he be forced to confront the truth about his origins? His breath caught in his throat. The torch flickered in the distance. The footsteps grew closer, and that cold voice still echoed in his mind. Asterisk, you cannot run from your destiny, Timothy. Asterisk, he felt a shiver run down his spine. Asterisk, who was out there? How do they know my name? Asterisk, the parchment in his tunic seemed to weigh a ton. He couldn't let it fall into the wrong hands. The footsteps quickened. Timothy clenched his fists. His heart raced. There was no choice. He had to run. He bolted forward, the uneven path punishing his feet. Sweat poured down his forehead as he tried to escape. But the footsteps behind him also accelerated. Suddenly, a hand grabbed his tunic. Timothy spun around and saw a hooded man, his eyes glowing like embers in the faint torchlight. Hand over the parchment. Now! Desperation enveloped him. That parchment held secrets that could change the course of faith. Handing it over meant betraying everything Paul had taught him, but resisting could mean his death. You don't understand, Timothy gasped. This can't fall into the wrong hands. The man tightened his grip on Timothy's wrist. And who said we're wrong? Timothy felt his blood freeze. Asterisk, could they be right? Had he been following a lie? Asterisk, the doubt wounded him more than any blade. All his life, he had followed Paul, believing in the calling he had received. But what if he had been manipulated? The man drew a dagger from his belt. Last chance, Timothy. Choose. Timothy closed his eyes for a brief second. Then he made the decision that would change everything. He tore the parchment into pieces and threw them into the wind. The hooded man roared in rage and lunged forward. Timothy tried to dodge, but he felt the cold blade pierce his flesh. A searing pain shot through him, and he collapsed to his knees. The world around him began to spin. He had sacrificed everything, but had it been in vain? Before the darkness engulfed him, he heard one last whisper in his ear. Asterisk, you chose poorly, Timothy. Asterisk, Timothy was wounded. Could this be the end of his journey? Or was redemption still waiting for him? The pain was unbearable. Warm blood flowed from his wound, staining the dry earth as Timothy struggled to keep his eyes open. The hooded man had vanished into darkness, leaving only the weight of his words. Asterisk, you chose poorly, poorly. Asterisk, how could destroying the parchment have been a mistake? It contained dangerous secrets. But why did he feel something was still unresolved? With great difficulty, he tried to rise. His body trembled. Death seemed near, but something inside him refused to give up. Paul wouldn't have given up. He closed his eyes and murmured a prayer. It was then that he heard footsteps. Someone was approaching. His heart raced. Was it the hooded man returning to finish the job, or an ally? His blurry vision made it hard to distinguish the figure before him. But when the person knelt and touched his face with gentle hands, a chill ran through his skin. Timothy, do not be afraid. You have not yet fulfilled your mission. The voice was familiar, soft but filled with authority. He recognized it, but from where? Straining his eyes to focus, everything suddenly changed. Before him, bathed in dim light, stood Paul. "This is impossible," Timothy whispered, feeling a mix of fear and hope. Paul smiled, but his expression was grave. "I never truly left. You just weren't ready to see me." The impact coursed through Timothy's body like lightning. Asterisk, what did that mean? Was Paul alive, or was this something beyond human comprehension? Asterisk, he tried to speak, but his voice failed. "Listen, my son, what was written on that parchment wasn't just a secret. It was a warning, something the world isn't ready to understand." Timothy's mind reeled. He had destroyed a warning. Had he condemned himself and everyone else? Paul placed a hand over Timothy's bleeding chest. "You will pay a price for your choice, Timothy, but through the pain, you will find the ultimate truth." The light around them intensified, and suddenly Paul disappeared. Timothy gasped. The pain remained, but something inside him had changed. The price he would pay would be high, but now he understood his mission had only just begun. Timothy lost one secret, but uncovered an even greater one. What will be the true cost of his choice? Time passed, and Timothy became more than a disciple. He became a leader, a guide for those seeking the truth. The trials he faced did not destroy him. They shaped him. Every pain, every doubt, every sacrifice was necessary for him to understand his true purpose. He learned that faith isn't about easy answers, but about the courage to move forward, even when the path isn't clear. That the truth, no matter how painful, is always a key to liberation. Timothy learned that not all battles are won with strength, but with perseverance, wisdom, and humility. A lesson that still resonates in our lives today. What does this story teach us? Timothy's journey reflects challenges we all face. The fear of the unknown. Like him, we often hesitate in the face of the new, fearing mistakes and wondering if we're ready. But faith demands movement, even without guarantees. Tough decisions. He had to choose between what was right and what was easy, between keeping the truth to himself or sharing it with the world. How many times do we face these same decisions in our own lives? The price of truth. Timothy learned that the truth isn't always comfortable, but it's always worth it. Today, we too are challenged to be authentic, even when it costs us something. The greater purpose. At the end, he realized his mission was bigger than himself. That's a powerful lesson. We don't live just for ourselves, but to leave a positive impact on the world. How do we apply this today? When facing difficulties, we can remember that every challenge molds our strength. When we doubt ourselves, we can remember that even the greatest leaders faced uncertainties before finding their way. When confronted with tough decisions, we can ask ourselves, what is right, not just what is easiest? Above all, we can trust that every struggle has a purpose, and true victory comes to those who persist. Timothy learned this through pain, but his story allows us to learn through reflection. And now the question is, what truth are you willing to carry with you? If you enjoyed this story, similar biblical tales will appear on your screen. Click to watch them, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a like. May God be with you.